I wish I knew about this seed starting hack sooner. See, we're gardening in zone 6B, which means that we're getting frost all the way through April and into May. But with this seed starting technique, we actually turn the frost into an ally now to grow powerhouse plants. You're probably thinking I'm going to give you some sort of long drawn out technique that's super complicated and takes forever to master. And you'd be wrong if you're thinking that, because this technique actually saves time. You can get started with stuff you probably have lying around the house, and it almost completely eliminates the need for you to baby your seedlings into maturity. Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm Taylor, and over the last few years, Cassidy and I have tried just about every seed starting technique that we could find. And after a lot of iterations, we have landed on the potting soil recipe that we're using this year, and we've decided to share it. So if you want to get our special homemade potting soil recipe, go ahead and hit the link in the description, and you can download a free copy to use to make your own potting soil, save some money, grow healthier plants. Sound good? Now, while for many of our plants we still start indoors during the cold months, we also take advantage of the freezing temperatures that we get in our area. But I'll say, if you want to take advantage of winter sowing, you're going to need to be growing in zone 7 and below. If you're above zone 7, you're not getting freezing temperatures enough, and this is just probably not going to work the same way. Unless you want to try it out in a fridge or something, but if you do, you're on your own with that. For those of us who live in zones where the ground freezes in the winter, we have the opportunity to naturally stratify our plant seeds by partially exposing them to cold temperatures while keeping them alive in mini greenhouses. Getting ahead on your seed sowing sounds interesting to you, keep watching. The first reason that winter sowing could be a great option for you is that it is a pretty cost-effective method of starting your seeds. You don't need to purchase grow lights or heating mats, which for the record, we will also be using this year. But if you'd rather not make that investment right now, you can skip it by winter sowing. There's really minimal investment overall in seed starting supplies. You can use recycled containers like milk jugs or old plastic totes or Tupperwares. Winter sowing also mirrors a more natural growing process. When seeds are exposed to cold, moist conditions for 4 to 12 weeks, it softens their coats and triggers germination. This is a process called stratification. Through this process, the plants that pop out on the other side are often more acclimated to outdoor conditions. They're hypothetically, and in our experience, thoroughly resistant to cold temperatures, which means that if they're longer season crops like tomatoes, cukes, and peps, you get more harvest deeper into the fall. There are also a number of practical benefits. With winter sowing, you're reducing water evaporation and even just the need to water your plants regularly as you do when you're starting seeds indoors. You also lower your risk of fungal diseases like damping off, because the lower temperatures are not conducive for the survival of a lot of pathogenic compounds. We've also found that we generally have better germination rates when we winter sow. Plus, the survival rate of transplanting them into the soil goes up to basically 100%. Anytime you disrupt a plant's environment, you risk losing it. With winter sowing, you're not really disrupting anything. It's going from being outside with a little bit of plastic covering to being outside with no covering. Finally, the last benefit that we find to winter sowing is the time-saving component. The seedlings are growing under natural light, we don't have to monitor their temperatures, and there's really minimal daily maintenance required once you set up your pods. So now that you know about some of the amazing benefits of starting your seeds outdoors, let's talk about how you're going to do it. There are an unlimited amount of options for what you can make your winter sowing pods out of, but in essence, you're creating a little greenhouse for your plants. We've used many different devices in the past. Milk jugs work great. They're cost effective because as long as you or someone you know drinks milk, you're getting them for free. We'll show you how to set these up in a minute. Another great option is plastic totes. We have used a variety of sizes of totes, the biggest probably being a 10-inch by 24-inch bin, the smallest being a 5 by 12-inch. Main thing with your totes is that you need them to be clear or opaque so that sunlight can get in. So let's talk about each of these options and how to set them up for your winter sowing pods. If you take the milk jug route, you want to first cut the jug in half about 4.5 inches from the bottom of the jug. Make sure that you leave the handle of the jug intact. Now, this next step is probably the most technical step. In order to achieve proper drainage and airflow, you will need to use a drill or some kind of tool to make perforations in the jug. We use an 1/8 inch drill bit for this. Make 6 to 8 holes on the bottom of the jug. Then drill 1 hole on each side of the milk jug, above where the soil level will come up to. For milk jugs, you will leave the cap off the jug. Now you've got a water entry hole, drainage holes, and airflow holes. 6 to 8 on the bottom. Now at this point, you will need to decide if you're going to plant your seeds into a flat of soil or if you use soil blocks. Each option has pros and cons. We are huge soil block enthusiasts, but we've done it both ways. For the soil flat option, the pros are that it's a bit simpler. You don't have to make soil blocks, and you don't have to invest in a soil blocker if you don't have one. That said, there are a few potential cons. While fungal diseases don't get established very easily, algae has been a problem for us in some of our bins in the past, and this is likely due to poor air circulation in the jug. Another potential downside to a flat of soil is that when it comes time to transplant your baby plants, you'll have to prick them out individually. Most plants are super hardy, and this will cause them no harm, but plants that have tangly root systems might struggle, especially if they're sensitive to that sort of thing. Root vegetables, delicate herbs like dill, parsley, and cilantro, and a lot of squashes are some examples of plants with sensitive roots. You can look up a master list of delicate root systemed plants, but the majority of these plants you transplant will do just fine. If you want to winter sow these delicate plants, soil blocks will be a great alternative. If you do decide to use soil blocks, make sure that you use medium-sized blocks. Minis are pretty finicky. They can very easily get oversaturated and just dissolve. And then on the other hand, if you suffer from a really extended dry period, there's a good chance that they will dry out. You really need the medium-sized blocks to make them work, which means that you'll need more growing pods because the blocks take up a little bit more space. But the pros are that you will have great airflow, keeping algae development at bay, and the soil blocks are really easy to transplant because you literally just pick them out of the pod and pop them in the ground. If you opt for just filling the jug with soil, you will want to fill it 4 inches deep. Make sure that your potting soil is well saturated and moist. And same for if you use soil blocks, you'll just place the blocks in the pod so that they have a small canal running between them. The next step is planting your seeds. Use your seed packets for reference on how deep to plant your seeds, but we usually just lightly press the seed into the soil or put it in the little soil block divot and then cover it with vermiculite to mulch. Then you need to close up the pod. But before you do that, we strongly recommend that you label your plants on the inside of the jug. We will also label on the outside, but with weather and sun exposure, the label runs the risk of wearing off, so it's always good practice to kind of label on the inside of the jug if possible. We also recommend that you use a very heavy-duty duct tape to seal the jug. We've tried packing tape in the past, and it usually just gets wet and peels off quickly once it gets wet. Once you've got your milk jug pod ready, you will want to follow these next instructions very carefully. With the cap removed, place the jug outside in your yard where it won't get kicked over by kids or pets. And then you're done. It is really that simple. That's it when it comes to milk jugs. If you want to upgrade your operation, you can use these totes that we found on Amazon a few years back. These work super well for us. They come with lids that seal so you don't need to use duct tape, and they look maybe a tad bit more normal to your neighbors. Make sure that you drill the same holes on the bottom, 6 to 8, evenly spaced out for drainage, 1 hole on each of the 4 sides above the soil line. And then since there's no hole on the top, drill another 6 to 8 holes in the lid to let water in. And we'll put a link to these specific totes in the description. Same process for putting soil in these, just fill them 4 inches deep or place the soil blocks in and close the lid. Now, when should you be sending out your winter sowing vessels into the cold? Start dates, of course, will depend on the seed and your zone. We use an incredible app called Seedtime that helps us keep track of all of that stuff. We're growing a lot of plants, and Seedtime is pretty useful in helping us know exactly when we're supposed to start different plants and then transplant them, and even keeps track of succession planting and all of that. I would definitely recommend that you check them out if you would find that organizational help useful. So on the earliest side for our zone, 6B, we're looking at the end of January. And then on the later end, we sow at the beginning of April. Here, we're planting our seeds that are not cold hardy, like tomatoes. If tomatoes sprout and get exposed to frost temps, they can die off. A general rule of thumb is for hardy annuals, winter sow them 3 to 4 months before your last frost date. And for tender annuals, you're looking at 1 to 2 months before your last frost. And that's winter sowing, guys. I hope that this hack was helpful to you and that you give it a try. And if you're thinking about your garden this year, you will want to check out our video on planning your entire garden. We've got a framework that will help you identify your dream garden, assess your capabilities, and then develop a sustainable plan that will actually help you achieve that dream garden. So check that out, and we will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.